Perfection is easy to admire, but it's impossible to remember. What stays with us are the cracks, the pauses, the moments when someone chose to be real instead of impressive. She didn't walk into rooms trying to be everything. She walked in as herself, sometimes unsure, sometimes tired, sometimes quietly strong. And somehow, that was enough to change the temperature of the room. People didn't remember her for having the right answers. They remembered how she made them feel safe asking the questions. She stumbled, she learned, she kept going, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. And in a world obsessed with flawless images and rehearsed lives, that kind of presence feels rare, powerful, unforgettable, because perfection fades the moment it's replaced. But authenticity lingers, it echoes. Long after the moment passes, long after the words are gone, you remember her, not because she was perfect, but because she was real. Imperfection is not a flaw in humanity, it is the evidence of it. To be imperfect is to be alive, to be shaped by experience, contradiction, and change. A perfect person is distant, untouchable, almost fictional. An imperfect person breathes, hesitates, breaks, repairs, and keeps moving. When we say her imperfections made her human, we are saying she did not live above life. She lived inside it. She forgot things. She overthought. She reacted emotionally when logic would have looked cleaner. But those moments were not weaknesses. They were signs that she was fully present in her own story, not observing it from a safe distance. Imperfection allows connection. People don't bond over flawless performances, they bond over shared vulnerability. When she admitted she didn't have it all figured out, she gave others permission to feel the same. When she failed and didn't pretend it didn't hurt, she became relatable instead of impressive. That relatability is powerful because it dissolves the illusion that strength requires perfection. It shows that strength can exist alongside doubt, fear, and mistakes. Her humanity made her accessible, and accessibility creates trust. Being imperfect also means being unfinished. She was always in progress, always learning, always adjusting. That constant becoming is what made her interesting. She didn't cling to an ideal version of herself. She allowed herself to evolve. Sometimes that growth was awkward. Sometimes it was slow. Sometimes it came after she made the same mistake twice. But growth doesn't follow clean lines. It loops, stumbles, pauses, and restarts. Her willingness to stay in that process, rather than rushing toward an image of perfection, reflected courage. Imperfection reveals values. How someone handles their flaws tells you more than how they display their strengths. She apologized when she was wrong. She reflected instead of deflecting. She learned to sit with discomfort rather than deny it. Those choices showed integrity. A perfect person never has to confront themselves. An imperfect one does, again and again. In facing her own limitations, she developed empathy. She understood that everyone is carrying something unseen because she was too. There is also honesty in imperfection. She didn't curate herself for approval. She didn't smooth every rough edge to be more palatable. She allowed contradictions to exist within her. Confidence and insecurity, independence and longing, resilience and softness. That honesty made her presence grounding. People sensed they didn't have to perform around her. They could exhale. They could be unfinished too. Imperfection brings texture to memory. We remember the laugh that came out at the wrong moment, the pause before a difficult truth, the tears that weren't hidden well. Those details stay because they feel real. Perfection is symmetrical and forgettable. Humanity is uneven and memorable. Her imperfections gave her shape, depth, and weight in the minds of those who knew her. To be imperfect also means to be affected. She let the world touch her. Loss changed her. Love marked her. Disappointment left bruises. But instead of hardening, she softened in places where others might have closed off. That openness was risky. It meant she felt more, but it also meant she lived more. Humanity requires that kind of exposure, the willingness to be changed by experience rather than protected from it. Imperfection dismantles the pressure to be extraordinary to be worthy. She didn't need to be exceptional at everything to matter. Her value wasn't in flawless execution, but in sincere effort. Showing up imperfectly is often harder than showing up polished, because it means facing the possibility of being seen as you are. She chose that risk repeatedly, and in doing so, she reminded others that being human is not something to overcome, but something to inhabit fully. Quiet strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention or validation. It doesn't need an audience to exist. It moves differently, slow, steady, almost invisible, until you realize how much weight it has been carrying all along. Her strength lived in that quiet space, not in dramatic declarations or bold displays, but in the consistent choice to endure, to stay gentle, to keep going when no one was watching. She didn't raise her voice to prove her power. She didn't compete to be the strongest in the room. Instead, she absorbed pressure without letting it turn her bitter. She handled disappointment without turning it into spectacle. When things fell apart, she didn't rush to explain herself or demand sympathy. She gathered herself privately and returned with the same calm presence, as if resilience were simply part of her breathing. Quiet strength shows itself in restraint, in choosing not to react when reaction would be easier, in choosing patience over pride. She knew when to step back, when to let silence speak, when to walk away without needing the last word. That kind of strength is often misunderstood as weakness, because it doesn't look aggressive or forceful. But it takes immense control to remain composed when emotions are loud, to stay kind when the situation invites cruelty. Her strength was also visible in consistency. She didn't burn bright and disappear. She stayed, through routine, through struggle, through repetition. She carried responsibilities without turning them into burdens for others. She showed up on ordinary days, not just the dramatic ones. That reliability came from inner resolve, not external pressure. People trusted her not because she promised much, but because she quietly delivered what she could. Quiet strength carries pain differently. She didn't deny it, but she didn't let it define her outward identity. She processed her struggles internally, often alone, not because she didn't need support, but because she respected her own healing process. She allowed herself to feel deeply without letting those feelings spill destructively into the world. That balance required awareness, discipline, and self-respect. There was courage in her softness. She remained open in a world that often rewards hardness. She chose compassion even after being disappointed. She listened without interrupting, helped without announcing, cared without conditions. Softness, when paired with boundaries, becomes a form of strength that is rare. It means knowing where you end and still choosing generosity. It means being vulnerable without being careless. Quiet strength also appears in endurance. She didn't escape difficult seasons by pretending they didn't exist. She lived through them, day by day, without shortcuts, without numbing herself into indifference. She allowed time to do its work. That patience was strength. Many people want quick transformation, instant healing, visible victory. She accepted the slower path of gradual rebuilding, knowing that what grows slowly tends to last. She didn't need recognition to keep doing the right thing. Much of her strength went unseen, unnoticed, unpraised, and yet she continued. That revealed a deep internal compass. Her actions were guided by values, not applause. She didn't measure herself by how loudly she was acknowledged, but by how honestly she lived. In moments of crisis, her strength didn't rush forward, it grounded itself. She became steadier when things were unstable. Others leaned on her not because she had all the answers, but because her presence reduced the chaos. She made space instead of taking it. She brought calm without forcing control. That ability to stabilize, rather than dominate, is one of the clearest signs of quiet strength. She understood that power doesn't always mean pushing forward. Sometimes it means pausing. Sometimes it means letting go. Sometimes it means choosing peace over proving a point. Those decisions are rarely celebrated, but they shape character. Her strength was not built on winning every battle, but on knowing which ones were worth her energy. Quiet strength leaves a lasting impression because it doesn't exhaust itself trying to be seen. It settles into people slowly. Over time, others realize how much she carried, how much she protected, how much she endured without complaint. And when she was no longer present, that absence felt heavy, not because she was loud, but because she had been steady. Presence is not something that can be rehearsed. It isn't crafted through image, polish, or effort to impress. It happens when someone stops performing and allows themselves to exist fully in a moment. She didn't enter spaces trying to be noticed or remembered. She entered them attentive, grounded, and open. That choice alone set her apart. While others were busy curating how they appeared, she was focused on where she was and who was in front of her. Performance seeks approval. Presence offers attention. She wasn't measuring reactions or adjusting herself to fit expectations. She didn't fill silence to avoid discomfort or exaggerate stories to hold interest. She let moments breathe. That stillness drew people in because it felt rare and honest. In a world trained to equate value with visibility, her quiet attentiveness carried its own gravity. Presence requires courage because it removes the mask. When you stop performing, you risk being seen without filters. She accepted that risk. She allowed her mood, her energy, her truth to exist without explanation. If she was tired, she didn't disguise it as enthusiasm. If she was joyful, she didn't dilute it to seem composed. That authenticity created trust. People sensed they were not being managed or manipulated. They were simply being met. She paid attention in ways that couldn't be faked. She remembered small details not because she tried to, but because she was actually listening. She noticed shifts in tone, changes in posture, pauses between words. That level of awareness only comes from presence. It signaled respect. It told others that they mattered enough for her to be fully there, not half distracted or preoccupied with how she was coming across. Performance often creates distance. It puts up a polished surface that others admire but cannot touch. Presence dissolves that distance. With her, conversations didn't feel like exchanges. They felt like shared space. She wasn't waiting for her turn to speak. She wasn't scanning for the next impressive thing to say. She allowed conversations to unfold naturally, even when they were imperfect or unfinished. She understood that being impressive is temporary, but being present leaves a trace. People forgot clever remarks and flawless appearances. They remembered how calm they felt around her, how unhurried, how accepted. That impact didn't come from doing more, but doing less. Less posing, less proving, less trying to be anything other than what the moment required. Presence also meant accepting discomfort. Without the shield of performance, there was nowhere to hide. Awkwardness wasn't smoothed over. Emotions weren't edited for effect. She stayed when moments felt uncertain or heavy. She didn't rush to fix or distract. She allowed things to be unresolved. That willingness to remain present in uncertainty made others feel less alone in theirs. She didn't confuse being quiet with being absent. Her silence was active, attentive, intentional. When she spoke, it carried weight because it wasn't constant. Her words weren't designed to impress. They were designed to be true. That difference was felt immediately. People leaned in, not because she demanded attention, but because her presence invited it. Performance often exhausts both the performer and the audience. It requires constant adjustment, constant awareness of how one is being perceived. Presence is lighter. It rests in alignment. She wasn't split between who she was and who she was trying to be. That internal coherence gave her ease. Being around her felt uncomplicated, as though nothing extra was required. She didn't chase moments that looked meaningful. She recognized meaning in the moments already happening. A shared silence, a half-finished thought, a simple gesture. Those moments don't photograph well, but they stay. Her life wasn't a series of highlights. It was a continuous experience of showing up fully where she stood. By choosing presence over performance, she reclaimed time. She wasn't rushing toward the next impression or outcome. She was grounded in the now. Hat groundedness slowed everything around her. People felt less pressure to entertain, to impress, to keep up. They felt permission to be human, to exist without explanation, to take up space without proving why. Kindness is often mistaken for grand gestures, dramatic sacrifices, or visible acts of generosity. But her kindness lived somewhere quieter, in the moments most people overlook. It appeared in how she treated people when there was nothing to gain, when no one was watching, when the interaction was too small to be remembered by anyone else. Those moments mattered because they revealed who she was when performance was unnecessary. She noticed details others missed, a change in someone's voice, a pause that lingered too long, a smile that didn't reach the eyes. Instead of ignoring those signals, she responded gently. She asked simple questions. She checked in later. She adjusted her tone without announcing why. These acts weren't dramatic, but they were precise. They met people exactly where they were, not where it was convenient to meet them. Her kindness didn't interrupt the room. It blended into it. She held doors without rushing anyone through. She made space in conversations instead of taking it. She waited. Waiting is a quiet form of generosity. It communicates patience, respect, and acknowledgement. She understood that not everyone moves at the same pace, and she didn't try to speed people up to match her own rhythm. She chose words carefully, not to sound impressive, but to avoid unnecessary harm. When honesty could have been sharp, she softened it without diluting the truth. When silence was kinder than commentary, she stayed quiet. That restraint required awareness. It meant thinking beyond self-expression and considering impact. Kindness in this form was intentional rather than impulsive. Small moments of kindness often require consistency. Anyone can be generous once. Few people remain kind when tired, stressed, or unnoticed. She did. She carried her manners into private spaces, into difficult moods, into ordinary days. She thanked people who were expected to help. She acknowledged effort even when the result wasn't perfect. That recognition made others feel seen, not evaluated. Her kindness was not rooted in obligation. It didn't come from wanting to be liked or praised. It came from understanding. She knew how heavy small moments could feel when someone was struggling. She knew that a single gentle interaction could interrupt a difficult day. That awareness shaped how she moved through the world. She didn't underestimate the power of subtle care. She respected boundaries, which is a form of kindness often overlooked. She didn't force help where it wasn't wanted. She didn't demand vulnerability in the name of concern. She allowed people to reveal themselves at their own pace. That respect made her kindness feel safe. It didn't intrude or overwhelm. It offered support without pressure. Her kindness also showed up in forgiveness, not the loud, performative kind, but the quiet decision to let things go. She didn't keep score. She didn't replay minor offenses to justify distance. She understood that people act from their own wounds, limitations, and fears. That understanding didn't excuse harm, but it allowed her to choose peace in situations where resentment would have been easier. In small moments, she defended dead people who weren't present. She corrected assumptions gently. She refused to participate in unnecessary cruelty, even when it was framed as humor. That kind of kindness requires courage. It risks discomfort. It challenges the social ease of going along. She chose integrity over convenience. She offered reassurance without exaggeration. She didn't inflate compliments or promise things she couldn't guarantee. Her encouragement was grounded and believable. It focused on effort, not perfection. That made it trustworthy. People felt supported rather than managed. Kindness in small moments accumulates. Individually, each act seems insignificant. Together, they shape how people feel around someone. With her, people felt calmer, less guarded, less pressured to perform. That emotional environment was created quietly over time through hundreds of unremarkable choices to be considerate. She didn't advertise her kindness. She didn't need acknowledgement for it to continue. Many of the people she affected never told her what her actions meant. Some may not have realized it themselves, but the impact existed regardless of recognition. Kindness doesn't require an audience to be real. In a world that often rewards visibility over substance, her attention to small moments was radical. It suggested that how you treat people when nothing is at stake says more than how you behave when everything is. Her kindness wasn't loud enough to trend or dramatic enough to be retold, but it lingered in memory, shaping how people spoke, acted, and felt long after the moment passed. Resilience is often imagined as something loud and triumphant, a dramatic rise after a visible fall. But her resilience lived in quieter spaces, shaped by endurance rather than spectacle. She carried pain without making it her entire identity. She didn't deny what hurt her, but she also didn't allow it to become the lens through which she treated the world. That balance required strength most people never saw. She had reasons to harden, disappointments that could have justified bitterness, losses that could have closed her off, moments where trust was broken and hope felt fragile. Yet she chose not to pass her pain forward. That choice was not passive. It demanded awareness, restraint, and repeated effort. Pain has a way of seeking expression, and she redirected it inward for healing rather than outward for harm. Her scars were real, even if they weren't visible. They shaped how she moved, how she hesitated, how she guarded certain parts of herself. But they did not erase her capacity for care. She remained considerate even when she was tired of being strong. She remained fair even when life had been unfair. That consistency revealed resilience as an ongoing practice, not a single moment of bravery. She learned to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to escape it. She allowed grief to take its time. She acknowledged anger without letting it dictate her actions. That emotional discipline didn't come from suppression but from understanding. She knew that unresolved pain doesn't disappear, it leaks. So she faced it privately, patiently, giving herself space to process without letting it spill into her relationships. Resilience also showed in how she spoke about her experiences. She didn't romanticize her struggles or use them to claim moral superiority. She didn't turn pain into a performance. When she shared, it was measured and thoughtful, grounded in reflection rather than reaction. That restraint protected both herself and others. It allowed her story to exist without demanding attention or pity. She refused to let suffering narrow her view of people. Instead of assuming the worst, she remained curious. She didn't approach the world defensively, even when she had been hurt before. That openness carried risk, but it also preserved her ability to connect. Resilience for her was not about building walls, it was about strengthening foundations. There were days when carrying her pain felt heavier than usual. On those days, resilience looked like getting through the basics, showing up, responding kindly, keeping promises. She didn't always feel hopeful, but she remained responsible for her behavior. That distinction mattered. Feelings changed, but her values stayed consistent. That stability is a quiet form of courage. She understood that healing is not linear. Some wounds reopened unexpectedly. Some memories returned without warning. She didn't interpret those moments as failure. She met them with patience. She allowed herself setbacks without self-contempt. That self-compassion prevented pain from becoming shame, and shame from becoming cruelty. Her resilience influenced others indirectly. People felt safer around her because she didn't project unresolved hurt. She didn't make her pain someone else's burden. That didn't mean she carried everything alone. It meant she chose carefully where and how to lean. She respected the emotional boundaries of others while honoring her own. She also recognized that resilience includes knowing when to rest. She didn't glorify exhaustion. She allowed herself pauses, silence, withdrawal when needed. That self-awareness protected her from burnout and bitterness. Resilience, in this sense, was sustainable rather than heroic. It prioritized longevity over dramatic recovery. Through all of this, she maintained her humanity. She laughed, she cared, she hoped, even cautiously. Pain didn't make her cold, it made her discerning. She chose where to invest her energy, where to open her heart, and where to let go. That discernment was born from experience, not fear. By carrying her scars without letting them define her, she modeled a form of strength that doesn't erase suffering but integrates it. Pain became part of her story, not the conclusion. It informed her compassion without controlling it. And in choosing not to harden, she preserved the very qualities that made her unforgettable. Impact is rarely immediate, and it is almost never loud. The most lasting influence settles quietly, taking shape over time in ways that are difficult to trace back to a single moment. Her impact worked like that. It didn't announce itself while she was present. It revealed itself later, in changed perspectives, softened reactions, and choices people didn't realize had been influenced by her, until they found themselves making them. She didn't try to leave a mark. She wasn't concerned with legacy or recognition. She focused on how she showed up in real time, believing that what mattered was the moment in front of her, not how it would be remembered. Ironically, that lack of intention made her influence stronger. People sensed there was no agenda behind her actions. What she gave felt genuine. And genuineness lingers. Her words stayed with people not because they were grand or quotable, but because they arrived at the right time. A simple sentence offered during uncertainty, a calm response during tension, a quiet acknowledgement when someone felt invisible. Those moments embedded themselves into memory because they met a need. Long after the details faded, the feeling remained. She changed how people treated others. Some became more patient after knowing her. Some became more honest. Some learned to listen instead of rushing to respond. These shifts didn't happen overnight, and they weren't dramatic enough to be celebrated. They simply became part of who those people were. That is what lasting impact looks like, not transformation that demands applause, but influence that becomes indistinguishable from personal growth. Her absence revealed her importance. When she was no longer present, people noticed the difference in tone, in energy, in emotional safety. Conversations felt slightly less grounded. Rooms felt a little emptier. That absence didn't come from dependency, but from the quiet stability she had provided. She had been a steady reference point, and without her, people became aware of how much she had anchored them. She didn't shape others by instructing them. She shaped them by example, by choosing integrity over convenience, by responding thoughtfully instead of reactively, by remaining consistent when it would have been easier to withdraw. Those behaviors gave people a model to follow, often unconsciously. Influence that works this way doesn't feel imposed, it feels discovered. Her impact crossed contexts. People carried her presence into CS she never visited and situations she never witnessed. They remembered how she handled pressure and tried to do the same. They remembered how she treated mistakes and softened their own judgments. In this way, her influence extended far beyond her immediate reach, multiplying quietly through others' actions. She mattered in ways that couldn't be measured. There were no metrics for how many people felt less alone because of her, or how many decisions were made differently because her voice echoed in someone's mind. Impact like that doesn't leave records. It lives in behavior, in restraint, in courage borrowed during difficult moments. She didn't need to be extraordinary to be influential. Her impact came from consistency rather than intensity. She didn't overwhelm people with inspiration. She grounded them. She didn't push others to become more. She allowed them to be themselves more fully. That permission is powerful. It creates space for authenticity, which then spreads naturally. Time strengthened her impact instead of weakening it. The longer she was gone from a moment, the clearer her influence became. People recognized patterns they had adopted, standards they now held, boundaries they had learned to respect. Her presence had recalibrated them quietly without force. She left behind more than memories. She left behind a way of seeing and being. People approached situations with more care because they had known her. They paused before reacting. They listened more closely. They chose gentleness more often. These changes didn't carry her name, but they carried her essence. Her lasting impact wasn't tied to perfection, achievement, or visibility. It was tied to how she made people feel over time, respected, understood, steady. Those feelings didn't fade when the moment ended. They integrated into people's inner lives, shaping how they related to themselves and others. Unforgettable people don't stay in the spotlight. They stay in the subconscious. They resurface in moments of choice, in pauses before words, in the quiet instinct to respond with care. Her influence lived there, not as a memory to revisit, but as a presence that continued to move through the world in subtle, enduring ways. In the end, she reminds us that being unforgettable has nothing to do with being flawless. It comes from choosing humanity over image, presence over performance, and kindness over convenience. She showed strength without noise, carried pain without spreading it, and left impact without trying to be remembered. Through her imperfections, she became real. Through her quiet resilience, she became steady. And through the way she lived, she became lasting. She didn't need to be extraordinary to matter. She mattered because she was sincere, attentive, and human. Long after the details fade, what remains is the imprint she left on how people think, feel, and treat one another. That is the kind of legacy perfection can never create.